You're listening to this week's episode of the Vacation Rental Business in Today's World podcast. You're about to start transforming your business and life with the information found here. We interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in the vacation short-term rental industry and supporting businesses. The information found here is a combination of brain science, transformational thinking, safety and loss prevention, and vacation short-term rental knowledge and experiences, all rolled into one to help you and your business to achieve levels you never thought possible. I am glad you are here, and now please welcome your host, Eric Thibodeau.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Safer VRs. I'm Eric Thibodeau. I'm your host, and I'm glad you're here. So today I'm recording, we're going to talk about level 3 safety. It's just a few days before Christmas. And I definitely want to wish everyone Merry Christmas. It's an interesting time for me. I thought about this podcast. Should I drop this one here or something else? But we're going to go ahead and do it since I promised and I believe in. I made a commitment to do all 4 levels 4 weeks in a row. And so here we are. So we're going to talk about level 3, but definitely want to wish everyone Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. After Christmas, we're going to take a little time off. We're going to run another podcast, and I think it's appropriate for the season and the time. It's going to be about, carbon monoxide, and it's the winter time. Definitely take a listen. I have did an interview a while back with Dr. Michael Laranaga, and he's expert in safety and loss prevention and risk assessments. And we have a conversation about carbon monoxide and a case study. We'll go through a fatal case study that happened in the hotel industry, but similar activities could occur in the vacation rental industry. So take a listen to that. It'll be the week after Christmas. But here we are, the week before Christmas. This will come out on the 21st, and we're going to talk about level 3 safety. So as a recap, we go back and do a quick review of the 3 previous episodes, and we talk about the 4 levels as I've defined them. First one is level 0. And that is basically in this property manager or vacation rental business, we're doing nothing in regards to safety and loss prevention. So this is level 0. Once again, not the place we want to be. The next level, as we evolve, we start to look at hazard recognition and mitigation. And we talked about that 2 weeks ago. Then we evolve again through level 2, policy management systems and observations, and how that plays in the vacation rental industry. And that was last week. So this week, it's about transformational thinking and identity. It's level 3, and it's the highest level, if you will. And the interesting thing about it is that really, this may be kind of a little rough and challenging because what I'm going to talk about is not really widely talked about in the entire safety industry. And then I'm working to narrow this down into the vacation rental industry. And so we'll go back and forth some, but here we go. And I think after January, I'll go deeper into this because this is really a complex topic, if you will. I've been studying it for 2.5 years and definitely wanting to share this with you because this is truly an evolutionary process to go beyond what we've been doing, even if we've been working all through level 1 and level 2. And if you've been in level 0, you definitely want to move out of there. So here we go. Let's start with this statement here. And I think it's applicable to our industry, any industry. And here it is. It's not that people want to be unsafe. Most people think they are already safe enough. I'll say that again. It's not that people want to be unsafe. Most people think they are already safe enough. And so that's interesting because I definitely agree. No one in our industry, our guests, our owners, our team, us as property managers and vacation rental owners, we didn't start this business. We didn't bring people in. We're not being hospitable in our industry if we think people are going to be injured or we're creating an unsafe environment. And we didn't show up today at work or any day with that intention. Yet people continue to be injured, our guests, our employees, and you have to wonder why. And here we go with this statement. It says, most people think they're already safe enough. I always say that everything begins with awareness. And I think that's really important for us to be aware of what that is. And are we being safe enough? So let's dig into this level 3 transformational thinking in your identity. So this information is probably new for you, as very few people or businesses are even aware. This is a unique approach I've adapted based on neuroscience, safety loss prevention, and a research that was conducted in Australia, which I'll allude to when we get there. I'm applying this information in the vacation short-term rental industry. This is innovative and an excellent opportunity for our industry as we continue to evolve. 95% of our actions are subconscious. So let's literally think about that. As we continue to grow older, probably by the age 35, maybe a little younger, all of our actions begin to be driven by the subconscious. Remember, we talked about subconscious and conscious last episode. Go back and take a look at that. But many times our brains has realized a course of action 6 to 7 seconds before we say or do anything. Okay. Remember my Karate Kid example, right? With wax on, wax off. If we allowed the conscious mind to respond to situations, particularly those that will threaten us, we would not survive. So the subconscious basically responds quicker, and we'll go through some of that. 95% of our actions are subconscious. So thinking about safety related to these subconscious patterns or beliefs that build habits and form your identity, right? So now we're working, and these actions are in our subconscious, and they're showing up in how we work. So what is your identity? I call it transformational thinking and identity. And what is your identity? Your identity is who you are at a subconscious level. You say, well, Eric, I don't know what does that look like? Who am I? And I'll say, if you're not sure about this, then look at your actions you take or don't take. Look at your life and your surroundings, and you will discover your identity. It's who you are at your core being. And I use the word being intentional at a subconscious level. So you won't be able to see this slide here, but I'm going to post it in the group out there. And it's a triangle with a circle around it. And it shows that identity, if you look at the base of the triangle, is your identity. It's who you are. Fundamentally, it's who you are. And then as we evolve from the base of the triangle, which is a Y, up to the point, right, we find the things that impact our identity. So and basically it starts out with stories. And what stories are is those things that we've made up in our mind that may be true or not true about a particular situation. Here's a key phrase, another one, I'll have a few of them today, but nothing has meaning except the meaning you assign it. And this is where stories come from. If I say, hey, wow, that car is really nice, and then you take that and say, gosh, that's an ugly car. Eric, what are you talking about? So I've assigned a meaning of what I think about that car. You've assigned a meaning which is different. And then from that, we build stories around it. And then what happens is if we repeat those stories, they become beliefs, and those beliefs become embedded into our subconscious mind. And basically they become part of our identity. And here's a quick story around that. When I was growing up, we had several cars in our family, and my mom drove a Toyota Corolla, and it was gray, probably in the late 70s, maybe early 80s. And the paint faded really quickly, right? And so we came up with this story that said, you don't want to buy a gray vehicle again because the paint fades within 1 or 2 years. And so we kept that on. Even I think about that today, about that particular story. And we talked about it through the years as we kept the car and eventually sold it. So in 2021, I guess, or 2020, I can't remember, I went and was going to buy a new vehicle. And, with the chip issues, there were just not a lot of vehicles on the lot, and I wanted a new truck. So they had a gray truck. And then what do you think popped into my mind? Hey, Eric, that's a gray vehicle. Gray vehicles, the paint fades really fast. And here's this story popping up that's about ready to make me move into a direction not to buy that vehicle. However, I've worked through the years, as I mentioned here, about recognizing stories that could impact my identity. And I said to myself, okay, well, paint technology has improved through the years. So that story is not really true. Really, most stories we tell ourselves are not true. So I went ahead and bought the gray vehicle and I reflected on that story that almost kept me from buying that vehicle. Next, we have beliefs as we progress up. So we have identity, stories, beliefs. Beliefs are those things that we've adopted over time, okay, that we've learned or we've observed, right? And basically, how a belief is formed, right? We have a thought. Thoughts come into our mind. Thoughts that we repeat over time become beliefs. Just like I had mentioned to you before, my story became a belief about the gray car and the paint because we repeated it time over time. And it became a story that drove me into my identity to not buy a gray vehicle. As we move from beliefs, we have, and let me just say, the further we move to the top of the triangle, the less impact that these various topics have on our identity. Our capabilities, what are we capable of doing? Next would be behavior, our behavior. And then third, or the very, I'm sorry, not third, but the top part is the environment. The environment that we exist in does impact our identity, right? Because we begin to adopt what we observe, okay? And this happens through what's called mirror neurons in our brain, where we see or hear other people doing things in the environment, and we go ahead and do that. And here's an example for that. When I was working in Texas I was working at a plant called the Chocolate Bayou plant in Alvin. It was, I don't know, probably about a 45, 50-minute drive from my home. And when I got to the plant, I would park because my office was inside the facility, and seatbelts weren't required inside the fenced area, right? Speed limit's 20 miles an hour. So I remember was at work one day and I picked someone up in my car. We were going back to my office and I went through the gate and I unbuckled my seatbelt. And she said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, because we don't have to wear seatbelts inside the fence area." And she said, "Well, don't you think it would be better if you were in a vehicle accident if you were wearing a seatbelt?" What changed between going outside the gate and in the gate? And I said, "Wow, okay." So I put my seatbelt on, and from that time on, every time I'm in a vehicle, I'm wearing a seatbelt. But the environment there said, "Hey, it's okay not to wear the seatbelt." And I let that drive my belief in the story that it wasn't necessary. So that's how the environment, many ways, how the environment can impact. And this really looks at impacts us in our work, in our relationships, in our health, in our wealth. And this is a very powerful icon that I have that I'll share. All right, so now when we continue, we all understand that we have the past, present, and the future. And we need to work in the present, or as I call now. Most people do not appreciate that you only ever have a safety incident in the moment or now. Every incident that occurs, right? I cut myself with a knife when I'm, cutting onions. I'm driving and I hit someone from behind. Everything happens in the now. When we look back at level 1 and 2 safety, as good as they have been, the activities that we address in level 1 and level 2 safety are before an incident or after an incident. I hope you appreciate that. Incidents happen in the now. In level 1, I'm looking at, let's say, steps on a stair. I'm looking at a pool cover, a hot tub cover. I'm looking at a fire extinguisher. That's before an incident happens. It could be also after an incident happens. However, when I'm in the moment right now, I'm cutting that onion, or I'm in the property checking fire extinguisher. I'm in the now. I'm a guest who needs the fire extinguisher. There's a fire in the kitchen. What is happening now? What we do in the moment when the incident is happening. That's critical. That's never been addressed by level 1 or 2 safety at all, right? So, and why is that? Because let's talk about that a little bit. So our brains are pattern seeking and matching machines driven by the very fast neural processors of the subconscious mind. So since we're serious about safety and loss prevention, we need to begin to understand and accept most of the time conscious processes, our conscious mind is only partially engaged. And we're going to talk about that here. And we talked about it in level 2 already. But the conscious mind, remember, is very slow to respond, yet we engage it when we're learning something new. It also takes an incredible amount of energy, okay? And by energy, I mean sugar and glucose in your body, to continue to focus for a long period of time. Now, imagine you've been in a course or you're at a BRMA seminar, something, and it's a really exciting topic. You're happy to be there, but maybe after 5 or 6 minutes, you're still listening, but you're not fully paying attention. Maybe it's 10 minutes. Why is that? Because our conscious minds can only pay attention for a little bit of time. Now, the subconscious mind continues to work all the time, even while we sleep. That's why if you're listening to music or you're listening to, let's say, positive affirmations or things at night, the subconscious mind is still processing that information. The conscious mind is out, it's sleeping, it's resting. But the subconscious mind, it continues to work. So let's think about a time when you stubbed your toe, you left your keys in the house, you cut your finger with a knife or a similar task. Think back to what were you doing at the moment of the incident or situation. Think back to that. Now, more than likely, you were doing a task you've done many times before, and your conscious mind was only partially focused, if at all, on your task. And here's a good example I'll give you for me. At my home, I have like a little boulder area on the kitchen countertop where I have my keys, my wallet, and whatever else I need, like if I'm leaving the house. And if it's not right there, I will walk out the house and forget it. I'll get to my truck and I won't have the keys. I'll look for my wallet and it'll be in the house, right? So when I go to leave the house to go somewhere in my vehicle, let's say I'm going to the post office or I'm doing whatever, I put everything right there with my keys and my wallet and my watch or whatever else. My phone is all right there. Because what's happened is I built a subconscious pattern around that. And when I think back to that, it goes back all the way from the time when I was in high school. If you remember some of my stories there, I was in the emergency response team. I was a firefighter. I was a volunteer. I was pretty young, but even as I grew up more, I continued. And when I would go out, everything was there. I didn't have time to be looking for my keys or anything, there's a fire call, emergency medical call. Same thing in the fire department. I built a routine or a pattern that says, don't have to look for everything, it's right there. My conscious mind was not engaged at all. Same thing we could go through with, like you stubbed your toe. We're going to eventually get to some of that here in a bit about what's happening, right? But more than likely, we're not paying attention, we're rushing, we're frustrated. Something is causing us to create some type of error, which we'll get to. So the conscious mind's not engaged. So all of level 2 safety is about the conscious mind. So how can we improve safety if we know it's not effective at all? So as we continue to talk about our subconscious, it's so powerful. Why is it so powerful? Here's one of the keys is our brain wants to protect us. That's one of its many jobs, the subconscious mind. See, have you ever touched a hot pot handle or stove? When you were younger, you may have done that. And then will you do that again? Probably not. The subconscious mind stores this to warn you in the future that says, hey, Eric, don't forget to check that pot handle. It could be hot. Hey, check that electrical wire. Make sure the switch is off, the power circuit is dead, you have no voltage before you work on it. Because subconscious says, I'm protecting you, go do this. And if your conscious mind tries to override that, a lot of times it's not going to be successful. So this is one of the reasons subconscious is so powerful. Our brain is a glucose sugar consuming machine. So what the brain does is it identifies those tasks that we perform often and automated. Like I talked about, like leaving my house. Okay, I talked about riding a bicycle or swimming, or we don't engage the conscious mind for these activities. Someone says, go ride a bike, I get on the bike and I go. Someone says, go to your car, we need to go quickly. I grab my stuff, it's all in one location and I go. Because the subconscious has built a pattern. And if you take a look at your daily activities, your life, because this is in your identity. It's in my identity to do these activities. And you will never do things that are not in your identity. I may have covered this before. For example, like I'm not a smoker. So you won't find me smoking. It's not my identity. I'm not a runner. Used to be a runner, but I don't run anymore. So you're not going to catch me out there jogging in the morning or in the evenings. It's not in my identity. You will never outperform your identity. You will only do what's in your identity. Doesn't mean you can't change your identity, but first of all, you have to be aware of it. Awareness is first, then comes understanding, and eventually knowing. So our experiences form our subconscious, whether they're physical or beliefs that we have, like riding a bike. Also, we've been talking about physical activities, but here, let's talk about some of these beliefs, particularly around money and wealth. Money does not grow on trees. Did you hear that when you grew up? Money is hard to come by. You have to work hard for your money. Or you could fill in the blanks with whatever statements you heard about money, about life, about relationships. When you were young, just like my story about the gray paint on the car, I created a story that became a belief that formed my identity. It's really interesting how subtle this happens. And actually, it only takes about 6 to 7 times of you repeating this for that to become a pattern in your life. So the subconscious helps us by storing these patterns and beliefs. And some of these patterns and beliefs could be good. Some of these patterns or beliefs may be harmful by keeping you in a pattern or belief that may no longer serve you. Just like my example with the gray painted on the car. That may have been true in the late 70s, early 80s, but in 2021, that didn't serve me anymore. And so I recognized quickly the story and I rewrote that belief. And I would say it's probably not one of those really strong, deep embedded beliefs, but no doubt that it came back up. And so when these things happen, it's not your fault, right? These were formed when you were younger from your parents, your family, authority figures, the news media, your friends, etc., that really come this way. And, just talking about friends, one of the many things I've done through the years is I worked at a tax office I was a tax preparer, senior tax preparer for 25 years. And, people would come into the office and we'd talk about their tax situation, preparing their taxes. And then they would say, well, my friend told me that I could do this. And then I said, well, okay, and here's why that doesn't work. But they said, well, that's not what my friend told me. And I said, well, you are not your friend. You are who you are. And what they're talking about doesn't apply in your situation. But yet the belief that their friend was right, whether they were a tax professional or not, still drove the individuals to basically say, hey, Eric, we don't believe you, even though you may be knowledgeable in the subject. And so you have to either provide that information and they have a choice and they make a choice. But see how powerful things are that we believe that people have ingrained into us. Now, we talked about how these are being formed. And when you find a belief or pattern that doesn't serve you, these can be rewired. And it's through a process called neuroplasticity. So you recognize the belief and it no longer serves you. And then you begin to ingrain in a pattern that does support you. And the research shows that it takes about 67 days to, we'll call this rewire this pattern or belief, where the old belief is severed and the new one that you're creating begins to take shape. That's not the purpose of this course, obviously, but something I've been trained on, and it's something we could do. However, just see, we talked about how challenging it is to move away from these beliefs and patterns that have been embedded in our subconscious, in our identity. So all this is going to be really important as we begin to look at safety and loss prevention, right? So we've built a foundation. And so how are patterns for safety and loss prevention formed? So when there's danger, is obvious and easy to see. I don't know, in the last few months, I've encountered, 2 snakes here crossing the path, right? In my walkway when I'm walking back and forth from my villa or to my office. And I'm not looking for snakes, but then all of a sudden my eyes see something and my feet stop. I didn't see the snake. I just saw some movement. My brain thought, hey, danger, stop. And there was a snake. So I let the snake cross, obviously. But also remember the hot pot handle, right? When danger is obvious and easy to see, basically, we learn from these experiences in the past. The response is quick, and you may not even recognize it. Remember, our subconscious will provide a response or answer 6 to 7 seconds before we even realize that there's a situation. And here's a good example with the snake. My conscious mind didn't see the snake. My conscious mind didn't say, hey, stop. I bet it was 3 seconds or more before I stopped and fully realized what was happening. Excellent example about how the subconscious is protecting us, particularly when there's danger. But once again, we have had to have learned experiences from the past that create that for us. So that was when danger was easy to see. Now, what about when danger is not obvious or easy to see? And this is what we encounter more times in business and life. Basically, if there's a situation and there's no negative consequences, then the subconscious allows the activity to persist, repeat, and build neural networks to support it. So if I observe something or I do something and there's no negative consequences with it, or my brain doesn't sense it, then I continue to do it. And then it reinforces the brain to continue to do that. For example, if I forget to check fire extinguishers in a property, I begin to develop a pattern about that. You can come up with so many examples, and most of the time we see it when an incident occurs. I had a good example here a few weeks back at work here in Egypt. Experienced guy was rotating, he was working on a machine lathe, and basically it's got spinning parts and it's machining out some pipe or piece of metal. And he put his hand in there to remove the little pieces they're being shaved off. And because he's done that so many times, he didn't have a negative consequence. He continues to repeat it, and his brain didn't say, hey, don't do that, right? I mean, when you think about how many times are we going to put our hand into a piece of rotating equipment, like a fan belt or a gear that's turning? And in this case, he was distracted. We'll talk about that later. But basically, he was distracted and he just put his hand in there. It hit the back of his hand, didn't do a lot of damage, but it could have. So continued, no negative consequences. Subconscious allows the activity or belief to persist, repeat, and build neural networks to support it. Now, this process that I just described is dependent on 3 things: the need or want to do the activity or have the belief. I want to work on this piece of machinery. I want to hurry up and finish my inspection of the property. That's number 1. Number 2 is a comfortable feeling during the activity or belief, enabling repetition to take place undisturbed. So I'm not discouraged. I don't feel any problems. I do this. It's okay. I take a benefit from it. And so once again, it repeats. Third item is the quality and quantity of the repetition, which determines how long to become automatic. And so the more times that I do this, and it takes as little as 7 to 9 times for me to do this behavior or have this belief that then supports this activity, but it's subconscious that there are no negative activities, no negative consequences. Now, when we talk about level 1 and 2 safety, we talk about risk. In our business, we talk about risk. In safety and loss prevention, we are fixated on risk. Guess what? The subconscious mind, which controls 95% of what we do, is blind to risk. Let me say that again. The subconscious mind, which controls 95% of what we do on a daily basis, is blind to risk. The subconscious mind does not assess risk. It just perceives danger, or it perceives something that you've embedded into it that is allowing it to go ahead and move forward. So, example, texting while driving. If my subconscious does not perceive danger, I will text while driving. Each time I do it, it reinforces it's okay. I may understand that this is a risky activity and I do it anyway. We could apply that to how we inspect properties, how we clean properties, how we do safety checks, how we do preventive maintenance. If I take a shortcut or I do something that doesn't demonstrate the negative consequence over time, I begin to build in subconsciously that it's okay. I use an example texting while driving because, hey, a lot of people do that. I do it sometimes and my wife gets really mad at me. And so I've learned to stop that. But here we go. This is what's happening. So the key here, this is important. What we do in the moment or the now is dominated by our subconscious mind. Risk is a calculation taking place in the conscious mind. So there we have it. What we do in the moment, right? And we know that incidents happen in the moment, not before, not after. And the incident happens, boom, just like that. The moment, the now is dominated by our subconscious mind. The risk, if I'm looking at the risk of a situation, then my conscious mind is engaged, and that's too slow. This is always going to create a problem for us. So we're used to thinking risk is the preeminent factor in all aspects of safety. This is why people find it difficult to grasp and understand the importance of subconscious perception of danger, because subconscious mind doesn't even acknowledge risk. Yet, so when we talk about risk and safety, this is what drives our conversation. Yet we just identified that in the moment when incidents occur, the subconscious mind is driving us and risk is not even considered. So we talk about level 1 and level 2 safety. They're important, right? Hazard recognition and risk mitigation. Level 2 emphasizes safety as a deliberate choice. So here I'm dealing with risk. Second one is safety is a deliberate choice, which means I'm engaging conscious mind. And here we begin to shed light that says, here's why we continue to have incidents in any industry, but we're focusing on the vacation rental industry. The subconscious mind is in control. It's driving our behaviors and our actions based upon our beliefs and patterns. Risk is not important. We don't accept it. And then deliberate choice is not really in charge. So level 1 and 2 safety are important things to keep people safe, and they're not doing enough to stop incidents because it's all about what's happening in the moment. The moment that I make a decision not to check the gate alarm in the backyard for the pool. So now back up and say, it's really important to keep people safe, and level 1 and 2 safety are not doing enough to stop incidents. That's because as we're learning in level 3, who we are at the identity level, the subconscious mind is driving how we work and how we think and how we believe. And that things that happen in the now, in the moment, are driven by the subconscious. So risk dominates how we work in safety, but people are influenced by their sense of danger. If it does not feel dangerous, they proceed, which is driven by the subconscious mind. You see how everything is starting to fit together, everyone? Is that, please note that incidents happen in the now. Everything we've understood about safety and health and loss prevention doesn't help us. We look at risk, but it doesn't help us in solving issues in the now. We think that we can look and consciously make a decision about safety, and we've understood now and learned that's not it's not valid, right? Because the subconscious is running. So here we go. We need to build a case, and why are these things happening? So it's not enough that people want to be unsafe. It's not that people want to be unsafe. Most people think they're already safe enough. Remember, we started this conversation that way. So now we've gotten a really good idea about what's happening. Let's look at what we need to do to begin to analyze and make some changes. So here's where the research that I mentioned earlier from Christian Sylvester in Australia. I find the work really amazing. It's innovative. And what I'm doing is adapting that to the vacation rental industry. So this may be a little more challenging, and I'm definitely going to cover this in a video with slides to get more things, get this maybe a little bit better planned out here, because there's a lot of information that's getting ready to come, and it may not be fully landing. And you know what? That's okay, because we need to reiterate things we learn through practice. So the statement that it's not that people want to be unsafe. Most people think they're already safe enough. So there are 4 illusions that create resistance and safety. And I believe they're appropriate for us here in the vacation rental industry. Maybe not all of them, but let's go through them. Illusion of attention. We think we notice far more than we do. Illusion number 1. Illusion number two is of competence. We believe we are more competent than we really are. I think I can relate to that sometimes. Here's a big one. Illusion of causality, right? Here we go. Subconscious mind is protecting us, deceives us, right? The illusion of causality deceives us into believing we understand what causes things to happen. If there is no harm from our activities, then there is no issue. So it's what the subconscious mind does. We rebuild the case that, hey, there's no problem here. I did this activity and I'm not connecting. What you're saying, Eric, is that if I don't put a handrail up there and people are used going up and down the stairs, but no one's fallen down the stairs yet. I don't believe that's what I call management by injury. And that's not where we're at. But we're linking this causality, and so nothing's happened. So we've created this illusion that there is no problem. The fourth one, illusion of memory. We think we remember more in detail with fewer errors than we do experience, fostered by insufficient feedback, lack of knowledge of any perceptions or wrongs allow the illusion to persist. So our memory. So we make mistakes without meaning to, right? And we need to understand why mistakes occur. Having mistakes is part of being human. We're all humans. Everyone I know on this planet is a human being, and we make mistakes. Yet we go out there and say, we don't make mistakes, or we go out and tell people don't make mistakes. And we just know, let's get that clear. We will make mistakes because we are human. So when analyzing mistakes, inattention, or critical errors, it's important to not assign blame, but describe a surrender or loss of control at the moment, which is part of being human. Something happened. Remember, 95% of our activities are driven by the subconscious mind. They just happen. So we're wanting to shift our subconscious mind to be our first line of defense in safety and loss prevention against the inherent human conditions of inattentiveness. We're going to start to see that the mistakes primarily driven by inattention, and then why is that? What can we do about it? I've referenced this before, but level 1 and level 2 safety do not address these type of issues. We are in the now. Incidents occur in the now, and everything else that we've talked about in level 1 and 2 safety talk about something before an incident, after an incident. Level 3 is beginning to analyze and look to support us in the now before an incident occurs. All right, so now there are some critical errors. I'll highlight these. There's 5 of them that I've come up with, and 3 I think are primarily associated with the vacation rental industry, but I think they could be anything. Here we go. Here's the 5. Eyes not on task. I believe this one's part of what we encounter in our industry. Not looking at what we're doing, where we're going, or what's going on around us. I'm going to cover these quickly. Next is mind not on task. Also something we find, and probably I would come up with and saying, probably one of the bigger issues that we face. Not thinking about what we're doing, where we are going, or what is going on around us. So now we're thinking. Eyes not on task is looking. Mind not on task is thinking. Third one, line of fire. So when we're working in general industry, or our maintenance teams, or our laundry teams, line of fire. Anything that can hit us when it moves or gets in our way when we move. Vehicle accidents, working with a wrench, pushing or pulling, or things that have stored energy. Maybe things we haven't talked about, but definitely line of fire in the general industry is by far one of the more serious critical errors that cause injury. Number 4, loss of balance, traction, or grip. This one I think applies in the vacation rental industry more. Anytime something falls, slips over, or comes free from restraint, including your hands. This could be holding on to handrails. This could be I'm stumbling on uneven working surfaces. I trip. These are applicable. Number 5, not as applicable, but could be we exceed our physical capacity. Anytime we overextend, do something in an awkward position to try or lift, lower, put down, push, pull, carry, move, or reach something that is beyond us. This is physical, could be there. So these are critical errors. When we perform these tasks, we tend to create injuries for our employees and also for our owners and for our guests. So there's golden habits that help people stay safe. And there's 5 of those. Number 1, when you're moving or when something that causes harm is moving around you, think about that and look for line of fire. Number 2, when there is a change in level of surface, think about and look for a loss of balance, traction, or grip. Number 3, look before moving in awareness of surroundings. Where your eyes are is where your attention is. Number 4, you are where your attention is. This is mine that I've added because I think the most powerful statement to adjust your thinking. You are where your attention is, thinking about what is around you in your work activities. Number 5, before starting in a physical activity, think about and look for exceeding physical capacity. So now, when inattention occurs, we're 95% more likely to be injured or forget a key aspect of our work, right? Inattention. So we cannot avoid what we are not thinking about or can't see, right? Awareness is the first step. We create a habit or pattern about thinking about the golden habits to begin developing neural pathways for this activity. We'll talk more about that later. It's difficult to create newer habits or beliefs. So let's identify the attention disruptors which allow us to engage in the critical areas. This is what I call understanding. So we talked about awareness. We cannot avoid what we are not thinking or can't see. So if we're not aware of a situation, how can we begin to address it? So now we're aware. We're going to look at these disruptors that are creating the issues that we need to understand. Rushing. Rushing is doing something faster than normal or doing more than one thing at a time. Rushing makes us more error prone, and we seldom think about why it does it and what we can do about it. 40 to 50% of people injured or were in a state of rush, either right before or when the incident occurred. I think rushing also applies to what we're doing when we're trying to rush and clean a property. We're rushing to clean or inspect a property, or we're rushing to get something fixed before the guest arrives. Rushing is a problem. So rushing increases the likelihood because it reduces our physical coordination. Like when you're using a knife to hurry up and cut vegetables, right? Our physical coordination suffers when we start to do things faster than we believe our motor skills allow us. Second is we shift the focus away from the task. So when we are rushing, we are concentrating on the result we want, not in the now, right? We're looking for where do we want to go? What place do we want to be? I'm less aware of what I'm doing in this moment. This is very common, and even more so when you become aware of it. Rushing is the first disruptor. Second, frustration. Frustration is the mental and physiological response to being prevented from taking or retaining control. So most of what occurs when rushing is also found in frustration. And that's with the reducing our physical coordination, and we shift our focus away from the task. 20% of people injured were in a state of rushing, either right before or when the incident occurred. Some examples would be like, I'm angry, I'm in anger, and road rage are examples. So frustration is influenced by what we perceive the intentions of others to be. I get frustrated because I believe that my supervisor wants me to do and finish this property quicker, even though that may not have been what he or she told us. Here's an interesting part, is that frustration is cumulative throughout the day. So frustration builds. It needs a way to be released. So physical coordination and shifting attention to their cause are similar to rushing. So here, move your attention from what is creating the frustration to something you're focused on. Fatigue is the third disruptor. This reduced capacity to perform a function because of prolonged physical or mental effort. The conscious mind experiences fatigue. As fatigue sets in, conscious mind no longer stays in the background. Fatigue causes the conscious mind to reduce its ability to process information. So fatigue makes us less coordinated. We cannot pay attention when fatigued, and we anticipate fewer incidents. Fourth one is complacency. So complacency is when the conscious mind and the subconscious mind become routinely misaligned during activity. And the key word is routinely misaligned. So distractions and preoccupations are not causes of critical errors, but they're really symptoms of complacency. So when we find our workers are distracted or preoccupied, it's really a symptom of complacency. We need to understand what's happening and why complacency is there. So it's often perceived to be similar to lazy, not caring, or irresponsible. And this is not really correct. Complacency is a fundamental human trait. Every one of us will spend time in this state. We cannot avoid this, and we can learn to manage it. So complacency is really, there's three things to consider, and complacency is actually the most complicated one. But here are three things associated that we need to look at. Movement. Without it, there is no possibility of coming into contact with a hazard. Like my guy with the machining, right? If the machine's not turning, he's not going to be injured. Cognitive misalignment. So the conscious mind is thinking about something that does not relate to what the subconscious is directing us to do. So this is a little more complicated, but basically, let's say I'm thinking about what I'm going to do when I get off of work today, and yet the subconscious is just telling me I'm in the motion of doing that. So this is where this misalignment begins to occur. This misalignment is routine and automatic. The misalignment does not occur as a unique event or as a result of specific circumstances, such as a sudden need to rush. Really, really important about this complacency piece. So with that, as we go on, we've been going for a bit, and I'm going to stop here because now the next part is really how do we get through and solve some of these issues. First part is awareness. Now we are aware that the subconscious is driving us. We have disruptors of complacency, frustration, rushing, and fatigue. So rushing, frustration, fatigue, and complacency. And they create these critical errors that basically, so I have a disruptor that if I'm rushing, my mind's not on the task. So I presented the critical errors, but basically the disruptors are creating the situation that allow us to not keep our eyes on task, to be in the line of fire, to not have our mind on the task, where we've lost balance, traction, or grip, or we've exceeded our physical capacity. So disruptors cause this, driven by a subconscious mind. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let you absorb all this. Drop me some questions. Let me know. This is a lot to absorb. I thought about breaking it into two, and I just said, I'm going to put it out there, and we're going to revisit some of these in another session in 2023. I made a commitment to get you level 3 safety. I'm delivering here today. I hope you find it interesting because I don't believe anybody's talked about this in the vacation rental industry, or it's not even really existing very much out there in the safety world, in the journal industry, but it's starting to come about. So I'll leave you here today. I appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Drop me a line on safervrs.com, eric@safervrs.com, and join our vacation rental safety group. And we'd love to have you in the Awakening Vacation Rental Safety Group, where we go into more depth and content and support each other in a community of proactive safety vacation rental managers and owners. Have a Merry Christmas. Enjoy some time, and I appreciate you listening. Go out and create a safe day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Safer VR's podcast with Eric Thibodeau. If you enjoy this, I would love you to join my Facebook group, The Safer Vacation Rentals, for more of the same. You can also join our email list at www.safervrs.com.